At my daughter's 8th birthday, my brother announced he got into Harvard. Then they turned it into his party, while my 8-year-old was made to rub frosting off the floor as they stepped over her. I didn't shout, but the next morning they found this on the table and went pale. They tell you kids remember the big things. The first day of school, the first time they ride a bike, the first time someone breaks their heart and you can't fix it with a Band-Aid and a cartoon. I used to think birthdays were the safe kind of big thing, the kind you can control if you try hard enough. Balloons, cake, a cheap plastic crown that somehow becomes sacred. One day where the world is supposed to look at your kid and say, "You matter." My daughter Emma had been counting down to turning 8 like it was a space launch. She didn't want a circus. She didn't want a crowd. She wanted it simple. Her best friend Zoe, and family, and a day that didn't get swallowed by someone else's noise. I built the whole afternoon around that. The living room looked like a pastel storm had moved in and decided to rent. Streamers, balloons, a banner that said, "Happy 8th birthday, Emma." The cake on the counter like a promise. Vanilla with strawberry filling, pink frosting, her name spelled out in fancy letters. By noon, people started trickling in. Not a flood, just the usual handful of relatives who show up for family obligations and free cake. My aunt arrived first, the one who always smells like perfume and opinions. She kissed Emma's cheek and said, "8 already," like Emma had personally sped up time to inconvenience her. My uncle followed, holding a gift bag and looking around my house the way people look at hotel rooms, curious, evaluating, like they're deciding whether the mattress is worth the price. A couple cousins came too, smiling, chatting, doing the social script. One of them immediately started filming little clips of Emma opening presents. Not malicious, just modern. Like childhood is only real if it gets archived. Mom and Dad were there, of course. They live with us. They were in their usual mode. Mom fluttering around like she was the host of a daytime show. Dad planted in a chair with that "I'm here, therefore I'm helpful" posture. My brother Ethan was there too, lounging like he belonged to the house in the same way a cat belongs to a windowsill. Comfortable, certain, waiting for attention without technically asking for it. Zoe arrived with her mother. Zoe and Emma disappeared into the orbit of each other immediately, as if gravity did the introductions. For a while, it worked. Emma was bright-eyed, bouncing between guests and the cake table, keeping one hand on her crown like it might blow away. She was so careful with her happiness it made me ache. When it was time, I carried the cake into the living room, candles ready, lighter in my hand. Emma and Zoe sat on the couch, knees tucked under them, waiting like this was the main event. This was the moment. And then Ethan stood up. "Before we do that," he said. Not loud at first, just enough to cut through the room. I felt my stomach drop because I know that tone. The "I'm about to redirect the spotlight" tone. The tone that comes from someone who's never been told no and has no reason to start believing in it now. Mom and Dad's faces were already set, smiling, ready, like they'd been rehearsing. Ethan held up his phone like evidence. "I got into Harvard." The room erupted the way it always does when Ethan says something. People clapped. My aunt gasped. Someone actually squealed. Dad slapped Ethan's back and said, "That's my boy," like Ethan had just carried a wounded soldier off a battlefield. And then Mom produced a second cake. A real one. Not a last-minute grocery store sheet cake. White frosting. Crimson letters. "Congrats, Ethan." Dad pulled out a banner. Harvard colors, stars, his name. It unfurled right over the edge of Emma's decorations, like it had been waiting to replace them. It was so planned it was almost impressive, if it hadn't been happening on my child's birthday. Emma's face shifted. Not a tantrum, not dramatic, just quiet. I was still holding the lighter. Emma's candles were still unlit. Around Ethan, adults swarmed. "When do you leave? Did you apply early? What are you studying?" "You must be so proud," someone told my mother, as if Emma didn't exist 6 feet away in a crown. Ethan stood in the middle of it, soaking it up, smiling that easy smile people get when praise has never been rationed. And then the front door opened again. More voices. Louder. Younger. Ethan's friends poured into my living room like they'd been invited personally by the concept of Harvard. One of them came in carrying a speaker. Another had a paper bag that clinked, and the sound made my jaw tighten because no good decision has ever announced itself with clinking glass at a child's party. "Harvard man!" someone yelled. Music started. Bass heavy. Too loud for a living room with balloons and an 8-year-old. Cups appeared. Bottles appeared. Somebody popped something open with that sharp hiss that does not belong next to pink frosting. And my parents let it happen. Mom laughed. Actually laughed, and waved her hand like she was blessing a ceremony. "Let them celebrate. It's Harvard." Emma's cake got nudged aside to make room for drinks. My table became Ethan's congratulatory bar. The room was moving around him like he had his own weather system. Somebody, an aunt, one of the cousins, someone who had already mentally reassigned me to helper, asked, "Natalie, can you grab more plates?" I looked at Emma. Her shoulders had dropped. Her crown had tilted. She was staring at the unlit candles like she was trying to understand why the room had forgotten the script. I didn't want to start shouting. Not in front of her, not in front of Zoe. So I nodded, like a trained animal. "Sure," I said. I walked into the kitchen because it was either that or break something. The music thumped through the walls. Laughter rose and fell. I grabbed the plates, stared at them for a second, took a breath. "Don't make it worse for Emma," I told myself. "Don't turn her birthday into a fight she'll remember." I picked up the stack and walked back in, and that's when I saw it. Emma's cake was on the floor. Not the whole thing, but enough. Pink frosting smeared across the hardwood like someone had wiped paint. And Emma was on her knees, in her birthday dress, crown still on her head, rubbing frosting off the floor with a paper towel like she'd been assigned the job. Her hands were shaking. Her mouth was tight. Her eyes were wet in that way kids get when they're trying not to embarrass themselves by crying. Adults stepped around her like she was furniture. I stopped so hard my breath caught. "Emma," I said, and my voice came out too soft, like I didn't want to scare her. She looked up at me, tears clinging to her lashes. "They told me to clean it," she whispered. Behind her, someone chuckled. A voice said, bright and casual, "It's good for kids. Teaches responsibility." I stared at the adults standing over my child, my parents chatting nearby like this was normal, Ethan's friends holding drinks like they were at a tailgate. And something inside me went quiet. Not calm, not forgiving. Just done. I put the plates down. I crouched next to Emma, took the paper towel out of her hand, and wiped the frosting myself in one slow swipe. "No," I said, not loud, but firm. "Not you." Emma's chin quivered. She tried to hold it in and couldn't. I helped her stand, wiped her hands, pulled her into me. "Come on," I said softly. "You and Zoe. Bedroom." Zoe followed without a word. Her mother hovered at the edge of the room, looking like she wanted to say something and couldn't find a polite version. In Emma's room, the girls sat on the bed, silent, like someone had stolen the language out of them. I tried to salvage a fragment. I found a small candle, stuck it into a cupcake, lit it, and sang happy birthday quietly like a secret. Emma blew it out without smiling. In the living room, the bass kept pounding. Ethan's name got shouted again, like a chant. Zoe's mother appeared in the doorway, her face tight in that careful, diplomatic way adults get when they're trying not to insult someone's family while actively witnessing them behave like trash. "Hey," she said softly, "I think we should go. It's getting a little intense." It was early afternoon, but I understood. This wasn't about time. This was about safety. Zoe looked confused. Emma's eyes filled again. Then Zoe and her mother left. Emma watched the door close and something inside her cracked. "I don't have anyone," she whispered. "You have me," I said immediately, pulling her into my chest. She cried into my shirt like she was trying to fold herself back into safety. I held her until the shaking stopped. When she finally fell into an exhausted sleep, I tucked her in and left her room like I was walking out of a hospital. The house was still loud, still celebrating. I walked into the living room and tried, twice, to get anyone's attention, to say something, to demand something. Nobody cared. I got waved off with laughter and "don't be dramatic" and "it's Harvard," and one particularly smug, "don't be a party pooper." So I walked away. I didn't shout. Not then. But the next morning, they found something on the kitchen table and went pale. It would be easier if I could say that night came out of nowhere, that Ethan was usually respectful, that my parents were usually normal grandparents, that this was a freak event caused by excitement and bad judgment. But nothing in my life with them has ever been a freak event. It's always been a pattern. A long, exhausting pattern where the rules bend for Ethan and snap for me. Ethan is 8 years younger than I am, which means when he was born, I was old enough to remember exactly what life looked like before him and how fast it changed after. I don't have a dramatic story of being screamed at or locked in closets. It was quieter than that. It was the look my mom got when she thought I couldn't see it. That flash of, "Ugh, you again," when I needed something. I was the accident, the interruption, the reason my parents had to settle down earlier than they wanted. They never said it out loud in one clean sentence. They didn't have to. Kids are excellent at reading tone. Then Ethan came along, and suddenly my parents acted like babies were the best thing they'd ever invented. They were excited. They were proud. They were affectionate in a way that always felt slightly theatrical, like they wanted an audience. And because I was 8, and because adults love turning oldest daughters into unpaid employees, I became part of the Ethan support team. "Watch him for a minute," my mom would say, and the minute would become hours. "Be patient," my dad would say. "You're older." I changed diapers before I learned long division. I made snacks. I watched cartoons I hated because Ethan liked them. I learned early that the easiest way to survive was to be useful. In school, I did well. Really well. Almost straight A's without trying to be flashy about it. I liked learning. I liked the feeling of being good at something that was mine. I talked about college like it was a door I could walk through. My parents treated that door like a trap. "College is expensive," Mom would say. "It's a waste of money." Dad would shrug like education was a hobby. "Be practical. You'll end up in debt." And because I was a teenager who wanted approval, I tried to fit inside the version of life they approved of. Focus on family. Don't get too ambitious. Don't make plans that require them to show up. Then Ethan hit his teens, and suddenly my parents discovered the concept of investing in a child. Tutors, programs, prep books, long conversations about his future. They talked about his education like it was a sacred mission. I remember standing in the kitchen once, years ago, watching my mom fill out paperwork for one of Ethan's tutoring programs and feeling something in my chest twist. "Why didn't you do that for me?" I asked. Mom didn't even look up. "It's different." "How?" I said. "I had better grades than Ethan. I had almost straight A's." She finally looked at me like I'd made a social mistake. "You weren't as talented." I laughed because it was either laugh or scream. "That's not true," I said. Dad stepped in with the classic parental escape hatch. "We didn't have the money back then." It would have almost worked if they weren't currently spending money they didn't have on Ethan's success. When I was 16, I started dating Grant. Grant was the son of family friends, the kind of family friends my parents treated like royalty. They loved Grant before I did. They loved that he was polite, that he said yes ma'am, that he came from a family with the right vibe. They encouraged it. A lot. At 16, I thought that meant they cared. I thought it meant I'd finally done something right. At 18, I got pregnant. Grant disappeared like someone hit delete. No long conversation. No dramatic goodbye. He just vanished. Like it wasn't his problem. And my parents, who had praised him like he was a future senator, turned on me so fast it gave me whiplash. They blamed me for ruining everything, for throwing away a good thing, for getting pregnant too early, as if pregnancy was something I did alone in my room like a craft project. They never once said, "He failed you." They said, "You failed." Grant went off to pursue his education and his future. I stayed home with a baby and the kind of exhaustion that makes your bones feel heavy. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. I had a child who needed food and diapers and a mother who didn't collapse. So I ground my way through it. I was good with computers. Always had been. I taught myself things late at night while Emma slept. I took work I could do from home. I did tasks, projects, whatever came my way. There were nights I worked until sunrise with one ear tuned to Emma's breathing, terrified she'd wake up and I'd have nothing left to give. Eventually, it started to work. Not rich work, not influencer work. Just stable. Stable enough to breathe. Stable enough to stop begging life for mercy. Stable enough to buy a house. Years later, my parents' business went under. I never got a clean explanation, just vague talk about bad luck and hard times and decisions that somehow happened to them, not because of them. They needed somewhere to go. It was supposed to be temporary. Ethan was underage then. He came too. 2 years passed. They never left. They didn't contribute. Not rent, not bills, not groceries. They settled in like my home was an extension of their entitlement. And somewhere along the way, the expectation quietly formed. I would pay for Ethan's future the way I'd always been expected to. Tuition, deposits, housing, whatever university required. Because I had money now, because I was family, because Ethan was the investment. So when I watched Emma on her knees cleaning frosting off the floor, it didn't feel like one ruined birthday. It felt like a warning. Emma didn't sleep that night. Not really. She lay in her bed staring at the dark, eyes open, body still, like she'd become a statue. I sat on the edge of her mattress and tried to offer her solutions, because that's what adults do when kids hurt. We want to fix it fast. We want to erase the pain so we don't have to sit in it. "We can celebrate again," I said softly. "We can do something special. I can book something. Emma turned her face away. "No," she whispered, like the word cost her. "It won't be the same," I said, trying to sound calm even though my chest felt like it was being squeezed. She didn't answer. She just blinked slowly, the way people do when they're trying not to cry. After a long silence, she said, "Can I just be alone?" My throat tightened. "Yeah," I said. "Of course." I stood, smoothed her blanket, kissed her forehead. She didn't move. I walked out of her room and closed the door gently. In the hallway, the house felt different. Not loud anymore, but not peaceful either, like the air had been poisoned and was waiting to settle. I went into my room and sat on the bed for a minute, hands in my lap, staring at the wall like it might tell me what to do next. Then Emma's voice echoed in my head, small, quiet, honest. "They don't care about me." I hadn't taught her those words. She'd learned them by watching. And that was the part that snapped something in me. Not anger exactly. Something colder. Something sharper. I went to my computer. The printer whirred in the quiet like it was the only honest sound in the house. I printed 3 notices, neat, clear, 30 days, Mom, Dad, Ethan. I stacked them carefully, placed them on the kitchen table like I was setting out place cards for a dinner party. Then I went back to my room, shut the door, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling until sleep finally took me. Sometime in the morning, I woke up to shouting. Not the muffled kind, the full volume kind. Mom's voice, sharp and high. Dad's lower rumble. Ethan's angry edge. I lay there for a second listening, and I hated the feeling that rose in my chest. Satisfaction. Not joy. Not pride. Just a small, guilty sense of, finally. Then someone banged on my door. "Natalie!" Mom hissed, like she was trying to keep her rage from waking the whole house and failing. I opened the door. Mom was standing there waving paper in her hand. Dad loomed behind her, jaw tight. Ethan stood a little back, eyes wide like he couldn't decide if he was furious or scared. "What is this?" Mom snapped. I looked at the paper, then at her face. "Keep your voice down," I said evenly. "Emma's sleeping." Mom's eyes flashed. "Are you serious right now?" "Yes," I said. "I'm serious right now." Dad stepped forward. "You can't be serious about this." Mom shoved the paper toward me. "You're kicking your family out?" I held her gaze. "Emma is my family." Ethan made a sound like a laugh, but it came out wrong. "This is insane." Mom's voice shook. "We live here. Where are we supposed to go?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Calm is louder than screaming when someone is expecting you to fold. "This is my house," I said. "And Emma's house. You're going to live somewhere else." Mom stared at me like she was waiting for me to blink and apologize. Dad tried a different angle. "Is this about last night? Natalie, it was a celebration." "It was my daughter's birthday," I said. Ethan scoffed. "Oh, wow. You're really doing this because of a party?" I didn't flinch. "Emma cried herself to sleep." Mom's mouth tightened. "You're jealous," she said, and it was almost funny how fast she reached for that. "You're jealous because Ethan is successful." I let out a short laugh that wasn't happy. My 8-year-old was on her knees cleaning frosting off the floor while people stepped over her, I said. "And you want to talk to me about jealousy?" Mom opened her mouth, then snapped it shut, then opened it again like she was buffering. "It's frosting," she spat finally. "It was her birthday," I said back. Ethan stepped forward. "She only had one friend over," he said, voice rising. "It wasn't even a real party. You're making a big deal out of nothing." Dad nodded like that made sense. "Birthdays happen every year," he added, like he was offering wisdom. "And Harvard happens once," Mom finished triumphantly. I stared at them, and the bleakness of it almost made me dizzy. "You could have celebrated any other day," I said quietly. "Any day. You chose hers." Mom's face reddened. "You're overreacting." I didn't argue. I didn't list every time they'd chosen Ethan. I didn't unpack the whole history in the hallway like a suitcase. I just pointed at the paper in her hand. "You have 30 days, I said. "All 3 of you." Mom's eyes went wild. "You can't do this." "I can," I said. "And I am." Dad tried to step into the doorway like he could physically block reality. "Come on. We're family." I held his gaze. "Then act like it." Then Emma stepped out, hair messy, face pale. "What's going on?" she asked, voice small. I turned instantly, my face softening like flipping a switch. "Nothing, baby," I said. Everything's okay. Emma blinked at the angry adults, then looked at me. Her eyes asked a question she didn't have words for. I walked to her, knelt, and smoothed her hair back. We're just talking, I said gently. Go back to bed, okay? She nodded, slowly, and disappeared back into her room. I stood, turned back to them, and repeated, steady and clear, 30 days. Something shifted. I saw it in their faces. The moment they realized I wasn't bluffing, that this wasn't a tantrum I'd apologize for later. Mom's mouth tightened. Dad looked away. Ethan's eyes hardened. They retreated without another word. In the days after, the house turned into a refrigerator. Not temperature-wise, emotion-wise. Everyone moved around each other like ghosts. Doors closed softly but with meaning. Cups got left on counters like tiny acts of war. Mom would sigh loudly when I walked into a room. Dad would stare through me like I was a stranger renting space. Ethan stayed mostly in his room, coming out only when he wanted food or an audience. I kept my routine. I got Emma ready for school. I packed her lunch. I smiled like I wasn't carrying a brick in my chest. I didn't let Emma wander into the adult tension. If she asked questions, I answered with calm, age-appropriate truth, and then redirected her to homework or cartoons or Zoe's latest dramatic playground story. In quiet moments, I started planning a redo birthday, something real, something safe, something that belonged to Emma, not to Ethan's ego. Then the calls started. Relatives I barely spoke to suddenly had my number. "You're kicking your family out?" one aunt demanded, like she'd caught me committing a crime. "You're making them homeless," someone else said. "How could you?" I didn't argue. I just told the truth. I described Emma's face, the frosting, the booze and the loud music, and my 8-year-old scrubbing the floor like she was staff. The line went quiet. "Oh," someone said finally, smaller, less righteous. And after that, the calls changed tone. People didn't apologize exactly, but the outrage drained out of them like someone pulled a plug. It was amazing how quickly family loyalty turned into awkward silence once the story involved an actual child. A week into the Cold War, I thought maybe that was the worst of it. Then there was another knock at my door. Mom and Dad stood there, tight-faced, eyes sharp. Dad spoke first, voice strained. "What happened to the money?" I stared at him. "What money?" Mom's hands were shaking. "We're trying to make the payment," she snapped. "Tuition deposit, housing deposit. We can't even log in. It's gone." I felt the calm settle in my bones like it had been waiting. "Oh," I said. "That." Mom's eyes widened. "Natalie, don't play games." I didn't. "That was my money," I said plainly. Dad's jaw clenched. "You said you'd help." "I was considering it," I said, "before you turned my daughter's birthday into a Harvard keg pregame." Mom's face twisted. "This is Harvard," she hissed, like the word itself should scare me into obedience. "Do you understand how expensive that is?" "I do," I said. "Which is why it's wild you assumed it was my responsibility." Dad's voice rose. "Natalie." I cut him off, still calm. "The account is in my name. You had temporary access because you expected me to pay. I removed your access. I moved the money back." Mom stared at me like she was trying to process a language she didn't speak. "You can't do that," she said, voice cracking. "I just did," I said. Her face went red. "We're going to be homeless." "You still have 23 days left," I reminded her. "Homeless is dramatic." Dad stepped forward. "You're ruining his future." "No," I said. "I'm refusing to fund it." Mom's voice went shrill. "He's your brother." "And Emma is my daughter," I said, and my voice finally sharpened. You made that very clear which one of those matters to you. They stared at me like I'd slapped them. You can't do this to an 18-year-old, Dad said. He can get loans, I said. He can work. He can apply for scholarships. He can figure it out. Mom's mouth fell open. Figure it out? He shouldn't have to. I almost laughed. Funny, that's what you told me. They stormed away in fury, slamming doors like punctuation. Emma was at school, thankfully. She didn't have to watch that one. That evening, Ethan came home. He didn't swagger. He didn't smirk. He looked shaken, like someone had unplugged the world he thought was guaranteed. He stood in the kitchen, hands in his hoodie pocket, eyes flicking toward me like he was nervous. Hey, he said. I didn't respond right away. I just kept washing a mug slowly, like I had all the time in the world. Ethan cleared his throat. Mom and Dad said you took the money. I did, I said. He swallowed. Natalie, I'm 18. How am I supposed to pay for college? I looked at him. Really looked. For the first time in his life, Ethan looked scared. The fees are insane, he whispered. Deposits, housing. It's Harvard. I know, I said. He took a step closer. I was kind of hoping you'd help me. You're my sister. You've always been there. There was something almost tender in the way he said it, like he believed it, like my role in his life was a natural law. He rushed on, softer now. And look, the party, I get it was messed up. It was my parents. They organized it. They pushed it. I didn't think, it's a kid's birthday, I know. That was, yeah. He looked down. People make mistakes. I didn't yell. I didn't punish him with a speech. I didn't even say I forgave him or didn't forgive him. I just said simply, I'm not paying. Ethan's face fell. But you can get a job, I said, part-time. You can apply for aid, scholarships, loans. You can figure it out. He stared at me like I'd suggested he climb Everest barefoot. I've never, he started, then stopped. I know, I said quietly. His voice cracked, just a little. You're really doing this? Yes, I said. He stood there, frozen, like he was waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. Finally, he backed away. Okay, he muttered. Then he left the kitchen with the kind of slow, defeated walk that makes you realize how much a person has always been carried. A few days later, Mom and Dad came at me with what they thought was the final weapon, the ultimatum. Mom stood in the hallway, arms crossed, eyes hard. We can figure out living arrangements, she said stiffly, like she was offering a compromise she didn't mean. If that's your issue. Dad nodded. We'll leave if you want. We'll work something out. Then Mom leaned forward, voice low and sharp. But you have to pay for Ethan. There it was. Clean. Clear. Not please. Not help. Have to. If you don't, she said, lips curling, then we're done. We're not your parents anymore. We want nothing to do with you. I stared at her. And the strangest thing happened. I didn't feel panic. I felt clarity, because right then, in that one sentence, she proved exactly what Emma had whispered the night of her birthday. They didn't care about their granddaughter enough to protect her. They cared about their son's status enough to sacrifice anyone. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. Mom blinked. Okay? I'm not paying, I said. And if cutting me off is what you need to do to feel righteous about it, go ahead. Dad's face tightened. Natalie. No, I said, calm again. I'm done. Mom stared at me like she expected me to collapse. I didn't. And somewhere behind her, in the quiet of the house, I imagined Emma's crown slipping off her head and being replaced by something better. Safety. A year later, Emma turned 9. We did a small birthday at home. Cake, candles, a few kids, the people who actually show up. Emma was happy. I was calm. The house felt like ours again. That's the update on us. Now the part everyone asks about. I haven't spoken to my parents since the day they left, but I still have cousins, and cousins love 2 things: group chats and disaster updates. From what I've heard, my parents ended up in a cheap rental across town. The kind with thin walls, bad carpet, and neighbors who also have temporary setbacks. They went back to work. Both of them. Long hours. Zero pride. And whatever savings they had? Gone. Burned trying to keep Ethan's Harvard story alive just a little longer. Which brings me to Ethan. Yes, he got into Harvard. My parents treated that acceptance like it came with a personality transplant and a guaranteed career. Then the first semester happened. Turns out Harvard doesn't care how many tutors you had. It still expects you to show up, keep up, and survive without someone rewriting your life for you. Ethan tried. Kind of. He took out loans and picked up jobs, but he'd never learned how to do work and study at the same time, because back home, work was something other people did for him. He started skipping classes, then shifts, then deadlines. My parents kept covering, kept paying, kept insisting he was adjusting. By the end of the year, he dropped out. And here's the part that's almost poetic. The last I heard, all 3 of them were still living together in that same cheap rental. My parents working themselves tired, still financing Ethan's existence, while Ethan spends most of his days on the couch watching TV, taking time off, waiting for motivation to fall out of the ceiling. Meanwhile, at my house, my money stays in my account, my stress stays low, and my daughter doesn't scrub anyone's mess off the floor on her birthday. I don't question kicking my parents out. Not once. The only thing I still wonder sometimes, late at night, when my brain gets dramatic, is Ethan. He was 18. Was refusing to pay the tuition the right call? Did I go too far, or not far enough? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more.